Wants me to do the guest. Okay. So Comcast. What's the rest of it?
COPGUEST.
COPT.
Cop guest.
Comcast.
No, cop. As in police.
Okay.
Sorry.
I thought you said Comcast. I'm like, oh,
No.
okay.
You're good to go.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to call to order the May 9th, 2022 regular meeting of the Philomath City Council. City Recorder, may we have the roll call, please?
Absolutely. Jessica Andrade.
Present.
Catherine Bisco.
Here.
Ruth Causey.
Here.
Matt Lehman.
Here.
David Lowe.
Here.
Note Councillor Nielsen and Mayor Jones both indicated they were out of town.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any visitors?
I do not have anyone signed up for visitors' comments.
Okay. With that, then we'll move along to the consent agenda. Are there any items anyone would like removed from the consent agenda? Okay. Hearing none, then I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes of April 11th, the minutes of April 25th, and the OLCC liquor license renewals.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Thank you. Any comments or discussion? I will note that I did submit some Scrivener's corrections to the city recorder.
I would be kind of disappointed if you didn't.
Don't want to disappoint. Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes and the OLCC liquor license renewals? Please raise your hand. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. With that, then we'll move along to new business and support for our Rural Economic Alliance. I believe I can turn it over to the city manager to review that.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll unmute just real quick to say hi. Sorry not to be with you today. I'm still getting over a little bit of a head cold, and the cough and the tickle is still there, so I don't want to be spreading that. So I'm glad to be able to have this ability to be with you from home. Just wanted to go through a presentation of some of the work that's been done on the economic development side. Again, had kind of limited time to get back with you on things. There are some numbers to get to at the end of this presentation, budgetary numbers. These are already included in the budget, but want to make sure they were in front of council for an opportunity to tweak as needed, and mostly just be able to answer any questions from you that might come up. So with that, let me share my screen and I'll go through this presentation, and happy to answer questions along the way. And hopefully is that showing up okay for everybody on the main screen?
Mm-hmm.
So this is economic development, brief history on regional partnerships. We've been referred to as the Great Eight, the Mid-Valley Partners, and now we've kind of dubbed ourselves the Rural Economic Alliance, or REAL for short, REAL. And so just going through, this doesn't line up exactly perfect, but I think it's pretty close. Just brief history. So this really initiative started back in 2014, mostly with some cities in Lynn County. There was a Ford Family Foundation project that they started looking at economic development within rural Lynn County. Rural Lynn Economic Development got on board and got formulated. That's mostly the kind of Albany, North Albany area, and Millersburg, and really focusing big on the transit center that's been pinged by the state to look at putting a bunch of money there for a regional transportation hub. And so that's really where RLID's been focusing a lot of their time and energy. 2016, Brownsville, Lebanon, Sweet Home kind of pulled together and said, you know, outside of what RLID's doing, we really feel like there's some more work that we've done within rural and county. Within the year, Halsey and Harrisburg had joined in, and then within the year after that, in 2018, is when they reached out to some of the rural Benton County cities, Adair Village, Monroe, and Philomath. And we all came on board and said, you know, we think we're onto something here. As a region, rural Lynn and Benton County, we need to be able to compete with Corvallis, with City of Albany, with the stuff that Arled's doing. There's really a lot more we can do. So together we applied for a grant with the state. It was through Business Oregon. It was a Business Oregon Rural Opportunities Initiative grant. We applied, actually each individual community applied for $50,000 each. And instead we got between all of us, we got a $70,000 grant from Business Oregon. And we took that money and we contracted with Oregon Rain to hire a venture catalyst for our area. Venture catalyst focuses on entrepreneurs, working with investors to help entrepreneurs, a lot of one-on-one coaching. We had a pitch fest that was held at Philomath. They did a lot of one-on-one counseling, a whole range of different programs that Oregon Rain started conducting within our region in rural and in Benton County. And in 2019, we rolled that into a economic strategy and an action plan. Really tried to look out 3 and 5 years on what what was Mid-Valley Prosperity or Mid-Valley Partners was looking to do. There was some initial money in that $70,000 went towards some branding and logo and stuff. And so we kind of just slapped a name on ourselves and continued to work closely together. And when I say we, this is mostly city managers from the small cities, city administrators, or in like Lebanon's case or Sweet Home's case, they actually have economic development directors and associates that are focused on economic development in those little bit larger cities. So that's been really at that staff level, pulling together, looking for additional grants that we could apply for and kind of fulfilling our strategic plan for a region. If you recall, in 2020, the city was the host applicant for a USDA Rural Business Development Grant, which we received. That money just funneled through the city's coffers and went right to Real, or then MVP at the time, and went to fund our contract with Rain, which we renegotiated and went out for again. With COVID, we saw some slowing in the outreach that was done. Obviously, it was harder to do large events and meetups and that sort of bit for the entrepreneurs. At the same time, the practitioners started looking at more things we could do for economic development besides just entrepreneurship. We started looking at the rest of our strategic plan, building a website, pooling, doing some mapping for where the different resources were in our area. You know, if a business wanted to come to any one of these cities in rural Leonard Benton County, you know, where do they go to get more information, to get some assistance, to get training, to look at funding? Where are those opportunities? So that resource mapping was an important component of that. And so here just this last year, the group applied for another grant through Cascade West Council of Governments. We received $10,000 to work on updating our mission statement, kind of refocusing, looking at our branding and our marketing again, looking at the map development I talked about, and then also pulling a website together where we can put all of these different tools. And so that's kind of gotten us to here. A new mission statement is to build a thriving business economy throughout our rural communities. You can see the new branding with the Rural Economic Alliance, or REAL, Oregon. So pretty simple, but very clean branding. We wanted to say a little bit more about us than just Mid-Valley Partners. Wanted to speak to what we're actually working on doing. We also have contracted with a company to develop a website. So that, again, this would be a landing page where the city of Philomath's website and all the other jurisdictions will have a link that will pull people to this regional economic development website. And there they'll be able to find all sorts of things. I did provide, this is kind of in a preview stage at this point, but this is just a sampling of that website. Zero this out so I can see better. And I'll run through just quickly. Again, this is going through a review process at this time, but this would be the landing page. We're not overly excited about this photo necessarily because it doesn't really scream rural economic development, but it's very rural. But you just get an idea of the layout, you know, the map so people can get to where we're at and where we're coming from right away. And again, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but once this goes live, again, we'll link to on City's website. We'll do a Facebook post and put it in the newsletter and kind of do a big push once this is ready to go. So you're getting a little bit of a sneak preview now. Get in touch page, but you can kind of see, if I come back up, there's a little bit on who we are, gives us a little bit about our history. Nice Philomath photo there. So we got a lot of our photos and artwork submitted actually, which got utilized, which is nice. So again, kind of talks through participating cities, collaboration, resources, community. So there's a lot of information, really too much to go through here. I will just highlight this resources tab. Again, lots of information, starting a business, expanding a business, moving a business, some links on funding, information on enterprise zones, city resources. I'll click on that real quick. It'll give, again, another nice nod to Philomath there on that landing page. This will have links to development code for each of the cities, utility provider information, and then I'm going to jump into this one. This piece we're still vetting out, but this will have some of the key industries for our area. A lot of this information will get populated and we'll add to a little bit more, but these are the kind of the 5 key industries that the site's going to focus in on, and we'll have additional links and information on each of these as well as we go through. So just kind of a look at the website and the intent here. Again, it's really to be very clear about rural economic development in Lynn and Benton County. We want to be real clear again when people first land here about where we're looking at. We are going to pull Corvallis out of here because this looks like it's like all of Corvallis. So we're going to pull the name out there and just have that region and then have it blow up. And then we'll put Corvallis and Albany on this map, but they'll be a different color. So it'll be kind of background, just kind of give an idea. So again, little work in progress. We are making it accessible for multi-platforms, obviously. So whether you're on the tablet or on your smartphone, they're taking that into account as well. So that's kind of everything on the website itself. Maybe that's a good time to take a quick pause and see if there's any questions up to this point. And then I've got just a couple other slides to cover. Any questions specific to the website?
Councilor Biscoe.
So I really appreciate some of the work that's happening here, but my first impression is it's green and yellow.
I was gonna say
Just gonna say, right?
Yeah.
It really does elicit that response. Not that that's inappropriate, but we aren't Eugene, and maybe that's something that can be considered if we could. I know the yellow leans a little bit more towards orange, but it definitely looks green and yellow overall. So just
yeah, we're looking for more of a green and orange. It comes up a little more yellow, but we're working on that. It's been talked about tremendously. So, no, good call. Good call. Well, if I can, let me just go back to presentation. So we just did website preview. One of the other things that we're looking at is a couple of new videos that have been released. And so again, these will link there. We'll also link these directly on the city's website. So I do want to share these. I think they'll come across okay. Let me see if I can get to, nope. It's going to be difficult, right? I think it's this one. Here we go. So this is let me give you a little background. This is a video that Oregon Rain has put out. So this is part of the money that we were paying for Oregon Rain. They contracted with this company to come out. They interviewed different business owners and stakeholders again, some of the city administrators. I'm in this one for Philomath. They interviewed me and talked to me, as well as a few of our business owners. But they did one of these for each of the 8 jurisdictions, and then they did one video that was kind of all Lynn, kind of rural Lynn Benton counties, which took kind of snippets of all of this. But I did want to share this with you tonight as part of this. We're working on updating the city's, all of this information eventually kind of dump into the city's economic development kind of business page. It'll be additional information to what's already there. And again, this video will be part of that. So let me go ahead and just play this, and hopefully it comes across well. Somebody yell and holler if it hiccups or it doesn't come across very nice. It's nestled right up against Corvallis, which is a college town here in Oregon. Traditionally a timber town, and that's what really built Philomath and put us on the map. But as all of Oregon has transitioned away from timber being that mainstay, Philomath it's a great little mix of very traditional Oregon roots, but kind of this kind of newer generation of folks that support the university and are in the valley now.
Certainly one of the big benefits of relocating to a smaller town is that they're very welcoming. They want you to come, and you're going to be able to find a lot more space usually for a lot less money. My favorite thing about Philomath, honestly, is being able to bring this building back to life and having this historic roller rink be such a fun place. You never have the ability, I guess, to invest in your environment as much because it would be too expensive in a bigger city. And when you work in a rural community, you can really make your space what you want it to be.
I don't think in a bigger city you could text the city manager to ask them questions, which I do regularly. And that's nice, nice to be able to do that. Know that you don't have to take a number and wait in line, or just never know when you're going to hear back. So, I mean, I personally think that a lot of people want to live in communities that are smaller, and finding jobs that are career type jobs, it's not super easy, and so when you can find a company who's been around for a long time, isn't going to go anywhere, and you can grow with them, then you're going to want to work for a place like that. And that's what we're kind of hoping to maintain by staying in Philomath.
I really just love that I see friends and family gets to come in here, and I get to watch people that I know gather and just enjoy their time in here. Just being a part of the community, like being at the Brew and Wine Fest here in town, and like pairing up with Dirt Road and just local breweries down there was really fun. The hardest thing about starting a business is really just that first step and having somebody believe in you. And so to have something like Oregon Rain encouraging people and drawing them out, I think is a really critical step. And then engaging the small towns too and bringing them together and forming those coalitions is really important.
We need other businesses to survive in Philomath as well. So anything that can help a community, helps us. We need employment, we need, places to get lunch, we need, everything. So it's all got to be a working system, and the more and more help small businesses can get, the better off everybody's going to be, regardless of the size of the community.
And so no matter what type of business you have, whether it's more retail or it's more industrial, there's a place here in Philomath where you can land and hit the ground running, because there's a lot of resources here, a lot of access to infrastructure, access to good employment base, and it's just a really good spot to be in business right now. So again, that'll be on the website and up and going here shortly. And again, those just came out maybe a couple of weeks ago, so everybody's kind of getting those out and getting those done through. I think I just have a couple more slides. This is looking forward. Tangent has just joined us again, kind of adding to. So we've gone from 8 to 9. We've just applied for a rare intern, and we're looking to pool resources to be able to pay for that. It looks like we're on the waiting list, which means we didn't make the first cut, so we're looking to see if any of the first cuts aren't able to go forward with their agreements, and then we may be able to pick somebody up this year still. So we're hopeful there, but if not this year, then we'll sharpen our application and try again next year. The goal would be that rear intern would help us update our strategic plan and kind of serve almost as the director for the real program. We're applying for funds from the counties. Both Benton County and Lynn County have been very supportive. We've been getting anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000 a year from each of the counties to go towards the RAIN contract as well. That allows for the work to not only support economic development in the rural cities, but then RAIN also does work in Albany and Corvallis as well with some of that funding. Again, mentioned updating the strategic plan, which is kind of where we're at. COVID did put a delay on things a little bit. Our original agreement was through 2021. We kind of verbally extended that, and at this point, we're asking all of the participating communities to give another 1-year extension right now on the IGA that's in place. We've budgeted for $5,000 for real. $36.91 of that goes towards our agreement with RAIN to keep the economic or the entrepreneurship work that's being done going, and then some additional funding to help out with things like the rare intern or a consultant for strategic planning or other expenses that may come up over the next year or so. So again, that's already in the budget, but happy to take any feedback from the council or answer any questions that you might have about where we're at with our economic development efforts with REAL.
Any comments or questions for Chris? Chris, I would just like to ask how the council can best support you or support REAL in addition to the funds allocated by the city. Are there other ways that we can help?
Yeah, I think the next round of our strategic plan is going to look at the formation of a kind of regional economic development council that can help represent rural Oregon when we're looking at things like the much larger regional economic development plan, which includes Lane County and Benton County and all of Lincoln County and Lynn County. It's kind of the 4-county mix. We want to make sure that we've got a seat at the table there, and to do that, there needs to be a healthy mix of both practitioners and elected officials. And to this point, it's kind of been a matter of organizing and getting some entrepreneurship stuff going. But I think that next level is going to be making sure we've got some elected officials coming. So I could see that being an official appointment from the city council to have a liaison serve on that committee. But we're a little bit of ways off from that still. Maybe within the next 6 months, a year, we'll come back with a request for somebody to help staff that.
Okay. If someone wanted to see your strategic plan, where would they find it?
It'll be on the REAL website here in about a week. That'll be the best place. But right now it's in email format, and it's really just the practitioners that have it.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to share that with you.
That's okay. I can wait a couple weeks. Thank you. I think it looks great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sorry about the audio and the video. I'm sure that didn't come across great, but it's on YouTube. You can Google search it and pull it up, and the audio is a lot better if you watch it live, I'm sure, versus the recording.
Okay. Thank you. With that, our next item of business is ordinances and resolution. We have ordinance number 864, amending the Philomath Municipal Code 5.30, sale of tobacco products, and declaring an emergency. This is the first reading. Is this the second reading? I think that's where you come in.
I know, I'm sorry. I think it's the second reading.
Ordinance title 1.
Yeah.
Would you like me to do that?
No, I got it, thank
I
you.
guess Catherine can do that.
This is an ordinance amending Philomath Municipal Code, Chapter 5.30, sale of tobacco products and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Lehman.
Just, again, opposed to the use of the emergency clause. Doesn't seem necessary, but I'm not as concerned about it for this.
So you don't wish to make a motion to
I don't, but I just want to make a comment that it seems like emergency clauses are thrown around pretty loosely.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion? Councillor Lowe.
Well, I'm just curious, going from $35, what did, so that was $35 that the city of Philomath paid?
No,
Or
the retailers.
the retailers paid 35, but, and then we're going to the partnership, I guess, with the county where they'll take care of all of this. So for the $35 that the retailers paid before, what did they get, if anything? I mean, what was the value of that?
My impression is that they didn't get much. There was very little, if any, enforcement.
Okay.
I can speak to that briefly, Councillor Conley.
Please do.
Yeah, so the big push on here and was really the new regulations that have come into place. Even, for the city to be on our own and continue to do that, we would have had to increase our fee as well from that $35 because there's a lot of additional enforcement we would have had to do that we don't currently do. And we would have had to have upped that $35 as well, because we would have had to bring somebody on to do these inspections, do the checks, and to be compliant with the new state law. We can, but really the options were three: either go with the state's program, which was much more expensive, and have the state regulators do it. The county stepped in and said, we'll do it at the county level, and it'll be a reduced cost from what it would have been at the state, but we'll be compliant with the state's regulations. And the third option would be for the city to try to do this all on their own and contract all these services and all stuff. And again, it would have been probably substantially more because we don't have the expertise there. We'd be hiring a bunch of other people, and it's not really something we want to do. The county's preference, strong preference, was that at least at the county-wide level, we try to be consistent between Corvallis and Philomath and Adair and Monroe, and then there's any of the stores or outlets in the county area on how the new rules are administered. And that's kind of what we initially signed off on before we looked at the costs. I have talked a considerable amount with the county on these costs, and they feel like this is where the fee needs to be in order for them to hire the people they need to hire to do the enforcement and comply with state law. So these are new regulations. I think as Jim Brewer said here a month or so ago, they're not hiding anything. They're trying to make it more expensive to smoke cigarettes and use tobacco products in Oregon. And they're really not making any qualms about it. This is an added cost for the smoker. It's an added cost for the retailer, and that's intentional. It's entirely intentional. So really, between doing it ourselves or going with the county or the state, I felt like this is the best option. This code, or this ordinance, essentially just puts our current code on hiatus. So we won't enforce our code. The reason for the emergency clause is we don't want to have two different enforcements going at the same time. The emergency clause puts the county's ordinance in effect immediately and puts the city's ordinance or the city's code language on hiatus immediately, as opposed to having multiple jurisdictions with oversight.
Chris, have the retailers been notified of this increase? Do they know it's coming?
They have. Benton counties, I sent no less than 2 different notifications out to all the retailers, letting them know these changes and that there'll be the contact going forward.
I will also say that our retail licenses typically renewed in March, And so the retailers have been aware since March that this was happening because they received the first notification from us back in March that their license with us would be good through the end of the year, and that then Benton County would be taking over as the regulatory authority for their licensing after that. And so, and I had personal conversations with several of the retailers over the transition, so they're well versed in it.
Are they? Councilor Lowe.
How many retailers are there in the city?
That's
Do you
6
know? About 6?
gas stations,
Mhm.
the liquor store, the 2 deli markets, and Dollar General.
Okay.
So maybe 8.
Eight.
It's 6 to 8.
Did any of them object to the increase?
Not to us.
Not to you. Okay. Right.
They understood we were not the source.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, all in favor of the ordinance, please raise your hand.
We'll actually do a roll call vote on this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Roll call vote, my error.
Visco Roddick,
Yes.
Catherine Visco,
Yes.
Ruth Causey,
Yes,
Matt Lehman,
No,
David Lowe.
Yes.
Ordinance will come back at the next meeting for second reading.
thank you. Alrighty. Then the next item of business is Resolution 2205, authorizing application for a grant from the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department for skate park planning.
And I can speak to that a little bit. So I think we previously talked about working toward applying for a planning grant. We're not ready to apply for a construction grant for the skate park, but there are some planning funds available to help us get the community input. We'll do most of it, but just to help us hone in on that and really make sure that we capture what the community wants and needs for a skate park. And then we hope to also have them look at the feasibility of the current location a little bit to make sure that that's still a location where we could have an expanded skate park. It's next to the creek. There's maybe some considerations that we have to take into account on whether that's the best location. Our consultant for the master plan for the parks did suggest that most modern skate parks that they're building, they build them, you know, more out in town where people are driving by them. They're more centralized. So he did make a suggestion to look at that option when we do replace the skate park. So that's a possibility that we could just ask that consultant for some information about that and their opinion on that. So the very lengthy title on this resolution is the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department's template requirement for this resolution. This is really their standard requirement. And the grant, I am submitting the grant later this week. So this will allow us to submit the grant application. We can't submit it without this approval from the council.
Okay, thank you. Can you remind us how much you're applying for?
So we're applying for 30, well, the full amount is 30,000. So it's a 60-40 split. The city has just moved up because we're growing. We've moved up into a new category. And instead of 20%, we're now required to match 40% for this particular type of grant. So it's, I think, 18,000, 12,000 kind of a split. So we're hoping to get 18,000 from the state.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
How soon might we hear back on the result?
Yeah, I just looked at their schedule and it looks like they're out toward the fall for notifying. They have different grant applications that they do at the same time, like the larger construction grants, they have different levels. And so they have split it out a little bit, but they just show one timeline. And then they send us an email and say, your grant is actually on this timeline. So it's not really in the grant book. It just gives a really standard timeline. They said fall for notifications.
Okay. Oh, Councilor Bisco.
Chelsea, I just had a question. So you mentioned that we moved into a new category. Is that based on population or, okay. And what is that?
5,000 is
Okay,
that magic number that we've gone over now.
thank you.
Okay. If there are no further questions, then is this also a roll call vote?
No, that the approval of the resolution can be done by a simple motion to approve resolution 2205.
Okay,
I move that we approve resolution 2205.
do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Our next item of business is council reports. And I know we have several items that were included in our packet. Is there anyone who'd like to go first or report? Councilor Andrade, did you wish to speak to the inclusivity proposal?
Yes, I was just gonna get the letter out as a, just to kind of look at it for reference. And also Christopher is potentially gonna be here, but I suppose not.
He's here.
He's here.
He's there.
Oh, just kidding. Christopher, you wanna go for it?
Oh, well, you kick us off and then I'll chime in.
Oh, okay.
It's up to you.
Do you want to come?
Christopher, do you want to go up to the table?
My role is to empower you, so whatever you would like to do.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Christopher McMorrin, and I was the co-chair for the, I think, April 26th Inclusivity Committee meeting with Councilor Andrade. And as outlined in our memo, we took Councilor Lowe's questions and comments about whether or not the Inclusivity Committee should remain an official committee of the City Council, or if it should become an independent citizens commission or citizens group that's separate from the city government. The committee felt pretty strongly that it should remain an official body of the city government, and we sort of framed it as part of a larger discussion about what we think the committee should be. And the members of the committee were really big on sort of recommitting to focusing inward on city government. They felt like that's sort of why the committee was formed in the first place. So trying to come up with trainings for city staff or city council, trying to find opportunities to ensure that our resolutions, our ordinances, our code, our proclamations are all as inclusive as they can be. And trying to really get the city leadership on sort of a solid foundation moving forward. I think there's a desire among everyone here to be an inclusive city, and we just haven't really defined what that means and how we're going to go about that. So I think the committee sees that as sort of being the primary objective, is getting everyone on the same page. And because all of that is really very directly related to city government, we felt like it would be very difficult to make that happen if we weren't a part of city government. There were other things that people have come to the committee for, or that that Councilor Lowe brought up, things like event planning or like sort of community discussions that we think are really important. And our concern is just that we don't think that the committee can take those on as our priority right now until we sort of lay this solid foundation. And some of those may be better suited to outside groups or something like that. We think they're important, but we are focusing on some of those sort of inward facing things for the time being. Councilor Andrade, did I miss anything there?
Just to add to that last part of what you said, like not focusing on those events and outward facing stuff necessarily now, but I believe that the end goal is to be able to do both to some degree, like just kind of reallocating what percentage you have for inward versus outward as time moves on, and we have established that foundation. But you did a great job, Christopher.
Well, thank you very much. And
You nailed it.
well, shucks. But we are happy to answer any questions if there are any. And I guess the last, just the last paragraph, we are very grateful for the discussion. I think, as I said, we all have the common goal of making the Inclusivity Committee actually work and be effective. And I think having these discussions has helped us sort of continue to move in that direction. So, yes.
I just had a question about membership stuff. So I didn't notice it addressed in here, but that seemed to be one of the questions that came up quite a bit, was how the membership of the committee was determined and if there'd be permanent people on it and that kind of thing. So did you guys talk about that at all?
A little bit, yeah. I think Councilor Andrade might be able to answer that a little bit better than me, but we are very committed to ensuring that we are in accordance with all the rules and regulations we need to be. And I think it's a matter of working with Chris and Chelsea to dot those I's and cross those T's. So I don't have a direct answer for you.
Mine is that we're just going to be continuing to function the same way we have been, which is we have official inclusivity committee members, ones that have been assigned by the mayor, and then the elected officials, and then the unofficial. Moving forward, we will have applications. It was only this year that we had suggested people to council to approve. And everyone will have a vote, but of course, and it's not really a vote, it's more of like our work sessions with consensus kind of a thing, like, oh, let's add this to the document or what have you. Was there any other part of membership that you had a question about?
Nope, that was it.
Okay.
I do. So right now, how many citizen members are there of the committee? I know there's the number of the officials, but
yes,
how many do you have?
Just in general, like,
well, like
who are unelected?
Who are like permanent citizen members right now?
Let's see. I'd have to think about it.
Okay.
Cynthia, Cindy Conrad.
Yeah. Rose, Zena,
Brecker,
Maeve,
and
Christopher.
Christopher.
Do we count?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Those are them.
So it's like 5.
There's probably a couple more. There are a couple more who have come here and there, but often due to like other responsibilities. I mean, that's the thing. People who are drawn to this committee are typically those who have been marginalized in some way, and therefore, sometimes those things prevent us from being able to come to the meeting or participate to our fullest extent. So I think that there are some other people who don't come as frequently that are still wanting to be part of the group.
I appreciate that. Is there a way that those folks that do feel that way can do some sort of proxy kind of relationship with the committee? So in other words, they can have the safe place, the safe space to voice concerns or ideas or whatever needs to be done, and have a representative of the committee who is, feels that they can be in front of the public, voice those concerns. Is that your thought?
Are you saying like, sorry, some of it kind of went out in my earbud. So you were saying that if someone had concerns that were preventing them from coming at times, that they would tell me and then I could ask council to change. Was that what you were saying?
Somewhat along that line, but I just was saying someone that really isn't comfortable being in the public space with their opinions or thoughts, they could share that with a member of the committee, be it anybody,
Definitely.
and then have those represented during the discussion in the open section.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's something that I try to do in general, even as a counselor.
Yeah, and I think I touched on that a little bit too, with the second to last paragraph, just that I think we recognize that it's not always easy for folks to navigate city government, not even if they don't feel comfortable with it, they just don't feel like they understand it. So I think that's something that the committee will work on and get better at, is making city government more open and easy to navigate for everyone. So that would be part of that, I think.
So what would that look like? I mean, I understand where you want to go with that, but what happens? How do you know that you're there? How do you know that that you cross that barrier to whatever it is that is preventing people from feeling safe with city government? What is done to get to that other side?
Like, how will we know we've succeeded?
Yeah. How will you know?
Yeah.
How will we know?
That's a good question. And as I mentioned in here, the May meeting of the Inclusivity Committee will be actually writing out all of our sort of goals and objectives in more concrete terms. We didn't have time to do that at the April meeting just because we were responding to this. So that's a very good question. Definitely kind of
more or less that, and if there's something in particular that several people are feeling that isn't necessarily captured in the goals and objectives, and if they share that with me or someone else to share with council, and then they say, okay, cool, you did the thing and you made it better now, that would be the other way you would know.
I don't think we're going to do like a big study, but yeah, I guess the way it seems more like from the direction the committee was going is more, if we identify obstacles to effective participation or inclusion in city government, maybe there's just something about the way we do public comment that we could rework that would be better, or there's something about the way we do our proclamations or something, and we identify those, and then we can try to make those, just things we haven't thought about, and try to improve that. So it's not like, I don't think we're going to have a strategic plan, at least not yet. But maybe we'll get there soon. Yeah.
Well, since I'm the person that brought this up initially, no, I appreciate all of the effort, and the response is really good. So what I'm understanding is there is a desire to remain a city committee, which is great.
Yes.
Certainly encourage that personally. I do wish that have the success that the committee is looking for, that we can understand what that success is for those of us who are the ones that are required to change, I guess is what we've been asked to do. And that speaks to just how you get to that point. What is the change that I can hear about that you want to have happen?
Yeah, and so we'll be talking about that at the May meeting. And I do just want to, I don't know if it's as much change as much as I think we all agree on kind of, we want the city to be as inclusive as possible. We just think that the Inclusivity Committee will define sort of what that means, and then obviously present it to the City Council. Because, it's easy to talk about being inclusive and making city government accessible and everything, but what does that mean? So I think you're asking basically what we're asking. It's just that you made this committee to answer that question. So we will be working on that.
Yeah. And I did want to point out too that we do have a very strong inclusivity resolution that we passed shortly after George Floyd's death, and then we've reaffirmed rather. So the city is on record for that, and I understand that those are just words that may or may not be. Sometimes they're different schools of thought and just how meaningful those words are. I understand that, but we are, the city, I think, that is taking the right approach, as opposed to one of our neighbor cities that's taking the wrong approach, I believe. So, we are who we are, and we're going to do what we can do.
Yes, and I think the committee appreciates that. And again, I will also just reiterate, this is not me speaking as myself. This is on behalf of members of the committee. But yes, thank you very much. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention from my own experience, I think the Citizens Academy is very helpful in making it more comfortable to approach and interface with city government and even become a part of city government. So
Definitely.
I would hope that you can capitalize on that and perhaps become a part of it.
Yeah. Well, I would definitely be interested in doing that and talking about that with the committee. And I feel the exact same way, by the way. That's pretty much the reason why I'm a city councilor now. But to get back to the idea of like our objectives and goals, I just want to put a reminder out there that this has been on the docket for a really long time, and it has been shifted so many times because the city has asked us to look at resolution after resolution after resolution, and that there are quite a few of us who don't necessarily appreciate resolutions in particular because of what you had said, Councillor Lowe, about the words and wanting more action, because the resolutions tend to encourage things as opposed to give concrete actions that the council wishes to have people take.
So that being said, we will only be talking about our goals and objectives at the May meeting and nothing else, because
Yes, thank you.
Because every other meeting we put it at the bottom of the agenda, and now it's 2 years later and we've still not talked about it. So
can I ask a perspective question? So the makeup of this ad hoc committee has 3 city electeds and 1 city admin generally attending, and I know that sometimes is real close to the same balance as the community members that you have attending. Because this is a little bit different of a committee, would it be something to consider from the council perspective where we just have a liaison to this committee and maybe giving a little bit more space for the committee to be community oriented, a little less heavy on the city administration and elected space to encourage participation? Do you think there's any benefit in that? And I know that I would not object to councilors maybe rotating through those spaces rather than us having the same councilor members always attending that inclusivity committee meeting, just so that we are able to participate as well. So just kind of a mix up of how we do that inclusivity committee, if that's something to be considered.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've talked about that directly as a committee. I think there's definitely some worth in that. And I think my only concern with that is that we wouldn't want one counselor to have to speak for the entire council, but I guess if we rotated, that could help. And then it is helpful to have some city staff member there, just so we're like, can we do this? And they're like, no. Then we're like, okay.
Understood the value of that. And I guess my point was more that could we be more there to be listening, right, rather than so much. I don't know that I would say that it's being steered that way, but just the perception perhaps that it's an equal, whereas perhaps we could encourage more citizen participation. We do have strong chairperson and we do have strong co-chairs that are cycling through that space. So allowing them that space to take a little bit more lead in the meeting might have some value.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing for us to talk about our May meeting. Sort of what we want.
Sorry, I was writing notes. Yeah, no, that's a great thing. I will talk with Cindy's going to be our next co-chair, and so I'll talk to her about how we want to get that taken care of, since we want to talk about goals and objectives. But yeah.
And I endorse what you're saying, Councillor Bisco. I think that's a great observation. I've noticed that myself, and it might do something to help people feel less them against us. You know, all these people here that represent the government.
Yeah.
You know, so I believe what you're saying, Councillor Bisco, is good observation.
Councillor Lehman.
Yeah, so I also have that same question. So with like the planning commission, for example, they're somewhat autonomous and only have a liaison, whereas the other committees that we have all have staff, elected officials assigned to them. So technically, what's the difference between a commission and a committee? Can someone explain that to me? Or do we need to know that?
So I think it's going to depend, or the breakdown is going to be what power they have to make decisions. So the planning commission makes a preliminary decision that they then will pass on to the council, so that the council will then adopt or reject that decision. They're the ones that are doing the legwork in terms of looking at the applications, going through that criteria and making recommendations using their expertise. Whereas with boards, it's kind of less informal in that it's getting those kind of ideas talked about, trying to come up with ideas, but it's always just going to be a recommendation to council asking for their opinion. It's not as much of they're not making decisions per se, like the planning commission would be for you to then adopt or reject.
Gotcha.
So an advisory board or an advisory committee might be a better way.
I mean, I guess
The
that's
inclusivity committee has been kind of that space of,
Right.
they're not making decisions, right?
No.
They're
No.
advising,
We
having that insight and perspective. So do we
I mean, I think that's something
rebrand?
Yeah, that's
then
the question.
Yeah.
talk about in May.
I mean, it's more, yeah, it's something that we have been doing. I think maybe towards the beginning, there was like one or two things that Chris had to say, well, actually, you have to give that as a recommendation, but yeah, so I think it's just the wording. We can change it to advisory committee or board or something. But of course, I'll bring that to the committee with Cindy.
Anything else? All right,
Good job.
good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Christopher.
Thank you. Pleasure doing business with you.
Let's see, any other council reports?
I'll just do a quick council report if I can. Just a quick summary of the League of Oregon Cities Spring Conference. I was able to attend that, a 2-day event at Hermiston. Hermiston, Oregon was our host city, about 19,000 people in that city. Some of the resources that were made available to council were, we had opportunity to review SDC's infrastructure, resources, DEI. We had a particular DEI presentation that was significant. Councilors workshop on city council functionality was a 3-hour session and a guest facilitator. We had opportunity for cybersecurity, resourcing and training. We also had legislative representation from primarily the region, so the Hermiston and Eastern Oregon region, but both state House and Senate representatives came and speak and did the keynote on, I believe that was the second day. Rural resources continue to be a recurring theme, and then we had a guest speaker from the National League of Cities on ARPA and federal funding. So overall, a very worthwhile investment. It's a long drive out there, but it was great to be in that city and good opportunity. So looking forward to the fall conference as well. Just quick on the Oregon Rain discussion that kind of led into today's new business on the Rural Economic Alliance. I mentioned this at the Budget Committee, but just reinforcing it here is just that they have done some pretty significant things in the last just short years here, working in the Philomath community. I have had the opportunity to attend 2 of their 10-week sessions, and it's remarkable the resources that are available through that group, both in mentorship and in the training sessions once per week. And they have, as I mentioned as well, the Budget Committee, they are now having global mentorship and participants as well. So depending on what your scope of business might be, there's pretty much just about any space you'll be able to connect with somebody that can assist. They do have a Raindrops program as well that's part of this, and significant funding to where I have not seen any charges for any of these resources. So that Raindrops program is a one-on-one, and it could be on financial, it could be on marketing, it could be on just capacity building, anything small business. They're kind of hitting that full spectrum of business support. This current cohort, I want to say we have 5 or 6 individuals from the area, so right out of Philomath and just around, and then several folks from Corvallis as well. And then a quick update, Willamette Criminal Justice Council has continued to move forward with discussions supporting the Justice System Improvement Project, discussions on mental health services in Benton County and the region, and then legislative updates and impacts of the legislation legalizing marijuana and what that's looked like on a state level and how that's impacting our cities. So just a brief council report.
Could you estimate how many people attended the League of Oregon Cities Spring Conference?
I think they said it was right around 250. I don't know that I actually got a count. So it's smaller. Part of the appeal of that as well, though, was first time in Eastern Oregon, and it went over very, very well. But also the cost of the fall conference is cost prohibitive for some of the smaller cities. So this makes it an attainable resource once a year in the spring as well. So I think right around that 250 mark is what they thought.
Okay, thank you. Any other council reports? I would like to mention that last Saturday I attended a wine tasting fundraiser for Red Feather Ranch, which is an entity for women in the military who have suffered some kind of trauma. It's in its developmental stages, but the founder was there as well as the board of 2 members of their board. And Pheasant Court Winery hosted the event, and they had special wines that were sold in the benefit of the organization. So it was really fun and well attended.
Nice.
So, and there were also a couple of kids selling scones to raise money for Ukraine. So that was good too. Let's see, any other city events? Okay, with that then, I think if for those of you who have not listened to the the Public Works meeting of last week, there have been some developments with respect to the Streetscapes project. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris to discuss those and bring us up to date on that and any other items on the staff report.
Thanks, Councilor Carazzi. So I sent an email out. It came out late. I apologize. I had a second meeting with ODOT just late this afternoon to get the most up-to-date information. So I sent an email out here a little bit before 5 o'clock. And if you didn't have a chance to review that, not a problem. I'll go through those numbers with you. But the short of it is, with most recent price increases on construction, things like, anything petroleum-based, asphalt specifically, we've also seen increases in concrete costs, bricks and blocks and all that kind of stuff has gone up in price dramatically over the last 6 months to a year. And this is a big asphalt project. It's a major component of the project. So In short, looking at the estimate today as opposed to a year ago, we're over budget $1.7 million on the estimate. So we need to come up with $1.7 million. We being ODOT, City of Philomath, and maybe Campos. So let me share with you, first and foremost, I want to emphasize we are on schedule to submit kind of final plans for PS&E. This is plans, specifications, and estimates. This is an important part in the process. Let me share my screen real quick, and then I'll get into the numbers, but I think it's important to start with where we are. So this is taken off of ODOT's website, Transportation System Project Life Cycle, and you kind of start up in here with your planning, transitioning, business case development, scoping the project. And so we've kind of been through all this. We got our STIP adoption. When the STIP adoption was done, that's where we kind of locked in our initial budget estimate. We had a pretty high contingency of like 30% because there were just so many uncertainties still. But we kept working through the project, getting through project development, initiation. We had a regional phase gate where we had to get regional approval. We've gotten through there. Design acceptance we've gone through there. Preliminary planning, advanced plans, and so now we're to here in the final plans. So they're literally ironing out final details of the plans this week, and they'll be submitting. The plan is to submit by Friday the PS&E plans, specifications, and estimates. So that kind of gets us through this kind of final gate, if you will, before we start going to advertising the project, bid opening, construction, pre-construction, et cetera, right? And then we kind of end up here on identifying preservation needs and program development, and then you start all over again. So in the large cycle of things, this is kind of where we're at right now with the design aspect of it. So this is big. One of the big checks that we look at right now is we look at, based on the actual specifications and the plans, what are the estimates we're at? And that's where we're landing today, which is the estimates today are greater than the estimates that were given back here at project development and the project initiation stage of the STIP adoption. So looking at those numbers, let's bring up this one. And again, I think Ruth mentioned that she printed these off for you, so you should have hard copies in front of you. This is looking at, over on the right column, this was at STIP. At the initial project estimate was at $14,311,384, and current PS&E, this number has actually fluctuated up another $400,000, but as of the date that this chart was done, it was at 1.7, so we're actually closer to like 2.1 million over the original budget. So this breaks down where all the money's coming from, and again, just for review, so from Philomath Urban Renewal, there's $3.2 million. From our street STCs, 850. Storm STCs, which is going towards the bioswale, 300,000. From just general street fund dollars, 150. I reached out to Campo and was able to get $520,000 for the improvements on 13th Street, which used to be county jurisdiction. It's now city jurisdiction. So this money's essentially coming to the city to pay for 13th Street. So in total, that's $7.2 million. And then ODOT, similarly, they've got lots of different places the money's coming from. This was the 2017 preservation funds, 33.5 million. Active transfer, ADA transitions. These are leverage funds. These are specific for projects that are like shovel ready, and they had some additional leverage they could put. So that was an extra $2 million. And then some active transportation. Well, these are active transportation as well. So it was like the additional funds that went in for like rapid flashing beacons, the bike track, additional crossings, those types of things. Also a continuation of the project all the way down to 7th Street on Main, taking all the way to 7th. So that's where this $2 million came in. And then this was some additional bike ped money that came in for the project as well. So that was ODOT's contribution, which again brought us to here, which is the shortage. So, excuse me. So the next question is, where were the overages and where did that come from? This was the second document we gave you. ODOT's gone through this, primarily looking at construction at this point. I'm going to talk about engineering in just a minute, but on the construction side, it's pretty easy to go through. Here's the draft PS&E, and then here's the final PS&E where we're at today. You see what changed, and they've got essentially what ODOT's going to cover, which is anything that's between the two curbs is ODOT construction. Anything outside of the curb is considered City of Philomath improvement. And so, pretty simple analysis. You can break down who's paying for what overages. And for the most part, ODOT is picking up most of these overages. I'm going to go to the highlighted ones here. General excavations, $94,000 increase, $143,000 increase for subgrade stabilization. I won't go through a lot of this in detail, but concrete inlets, all that sort. You get down to wearing surfaces again. Here's some big increases here that you're looking at for surface. And then you get in here like the concrete walks. Here's your sidewalks, $113,000 more. A little bit more for concrete surfacing. We're saving a little bit on some concrete stairs because we eliminated some areas where we didn't need them. All of the pavers, the cost went up that from 137 estimate to 183. So there's a $46,000 increase just in the cost of the pavers alone. So it's that sort of bit. You can go through. Here's another $4,000 for some wide angle sheet aluminum that's outside of the curb. This is a lot of landscaping stuff. There's some additions, subtractions. All this is just changes. In total, it's actually a decrease of about $5,000. Even though there's some additions, there's a lot of things that we kind of pulled out and sharpened the pencil a little bit. There is a $60,000 for the metal inlay that was taken out of the project. That's still money that the city's going to spend. Although I don't think we're there. I think our budget's less than that. Chelsea's been working on that, but it got pulled out of the budget. And then we're paying a percentage of the mobilization. And there's our total 159. And they added in some of the contingency or our portion of the contingency. So that goes up. The 53 got split out, 30,000 for ODOT picking up and the city picking up 23,000. So they've got the city kicking in essentially an extra of the $1.7 million. Looks like the city's being asked by ODOT to pick up another $182,879, which initially, first blush doesn't sound great. At the same time, you're talking about a $1.7 million increase, and ODOT's looking to us for under $200,000. Now, the other increase that came into there, I mentioned that there was another $400,000 that got added. $100,000 of that is for some city-owned water hydrants that we need to move. There was an option for either us to have our public works crew move those water lines and those hydrants. We talked to Kevin about that. He doesn't feel like he's got the manpower or the time to be able to do that. So we talked to the engineers and ODOT about adding that into the project, which initially wasn't scoped. And they said they could do that. That's $100,000 to move all of those hydrants and do all that work. So that got added into the project. They're expecting that the city's going to do that as an additional $100,000. That can come from our water fund. It doesn't need to come out of the streetscape, urban renewal dollars. It doesn't need to come from street money. It can come from water dollars if we need to come up with that $100,000. So in short, what we're looking at is ODOT would like a commitment from the city. We've got an agreement with ODOT of what we're going to pay and what they're going to pay. Now that we've got a $1.7 million overage, what they're wanting to hear from the city is are you willing to work with us if we're going to cover all of these construction increases between the curb? Is the city willing to pay for some of these overages that we weren't anticipating? Cost of pavers, cost of concrete, and then the water hydrant work that you've added into the project. If you're willing to pay for that, then we can move forward through PS&D, get the approvals. We can still negotiate with them what that agreement looks like and the specific dollar amounts, but they're just wanting some assurance from the city that we're willing to come up with a little bit more money to have this project continue to move forward. A couple things before I catch my breath, because I know you have questions. We started with a 30% contingency for this project. That contingency has dropped. Much of that contingency, as we've seen that contingency drop from 30% to 20% to 10%, now down to 3.5%. A lot of that has been eaten up by these increased costs, because we've seen these increased costs over the last year and a half, 2 years. They've just been much more substantial in the last 6 months. So some of that's been eaten by contingency. The other that's been eaten a little bit at is on the engineering for this project. The city of Philomath has been paying for all of the engineering up to this point. We've been paying out of urban renewal dollars. The original estimate for engineering for the entire project was $1.1 million. That was before we added the bike, the cycle track area. We added in the stormwater area and all the additional work that they did on the storm storm track. We added in some additional work the engineer did on right-of-ways and acquisitions. They did all the legal descriptions on those. That got added in there. And then the rapid flashing beacons, those got added in. So every time that ODOT came to the table and said, hey, we have an extra $2 million to add in some additional things to the project, that $2 million came toward the construction of that, but it didn't add money for the engineering. The city's just split the bill for that engineering, that additional engineering. And we've done it knowing we had a high contingency and eventually it would eat down and we'd be okay. And really, other than the cost of asphalt and concrete and all that going through the roof over the last 6 months, we'd be sitting right where we needed to sit. The real difference in this has been these increased costs that have just skyrocketed and gone through the roof that nobody foresaw and we just didn't see them coming, that we're looking at. So, you know, there's room to negotiate. I guess looking forward, if the city council gives me a green light to give some assurance to ODOT that we're willing to look at spending some additional funds on this project, I will negotiate with ODOT on what that looks like. I think there's an argument to be made that, yes, you came up with additional construction dollars. How about coming up with some additional dollars to support the engineering that's gone in to support that? We're $1 million over the original engineering budget. It was 1.1. We've spent 2.1. Yeah, you've added, you know, $4 million in extra money for additional things into this project, but we've paid for the engineering for that to take place. I think there's an argument to be made that we should negotiate for some engineering dollars for some of that. I don't know how successful that negotiation will be, but I think it's worth making the argument. Again, the hydrant is stuff that was not in the original scope. The city was on the hook to do it either ourselves. Now we've got an agreement that they'll allow us to do as part of the project. I think we're on the hook for that. I don't think we can negotiate that away. It's about $100,000. So really you're talking about $180,000 or so of additional street funds in order to make this project get through PS&D after this Friday. Any questions on that? And then again, eventually tonight, I'm just looking for a general consensus to move forward, give ODOT some assurances, and negotiate and bring something back to you for a formal approval, probably next week.
Questions for the city manager? Councilor Lehman.
Yeah, assuming a worst case scenario and that we're not able to fund this project, what are the prospects of actually getting this street resurfaced by ODOT, since it's just trash right now?
ODOT, in my meeting this afternoon, I'll be very blunt. In my first meeting with ODOT, their reading of the agreement with the city was that the city was on the hook for any overages of construction, which I strongly disagreed with. And so we agreed to go back to the agreement, reread it, and get back with each other, look at our funding sources again and circle back. In circling back, ODOT said, nope, we're responsible for the overages between curbs. We're on board with this project. We want to do this project. We want the city to partner with us on this project, and we want to move forward. So it was a much different sentiment today than what I got a week and a half ago. I do believe that ODOT's committed to this project, but I also believe that they need the city's funding to make it happen. If we pulled out all together, I don't know that we would see them be able to come up with the funds to do the entire rest of the paving of the project anytime soon. I don't know what that means. I mean, it's not going to happen this summer. It wouldn't happen next summer. It may be 2 or 3 years before they'd be able to prioritize funds for this project if the city just pulled out altogether and said we weren't going to put in our, additional $5 million at this point. So they need our funding, but they are committed to, like I said, they're covering, essentially $1.6 million of these overages in order to help the project move forward. They're just wanting the city to contribute outside of the curb, our addition to that.
Councilor Lowe?
Yeah, a few things. So I'm trying to understand exactly what kind of money you're asking us to authorize for you. So I heard 183,000, which is our share of that. And then you're talking about the hydrants. I'm not sure just how much of the hydrant money we're supposed to allocate. Is it 183? Is it 300, 400?
The hydrant money is $100,000 for the work for the hydrants.
Okay, so we have 183 and 100
plus 100, so 283. So I'm rounding up to 300,000, but it's 283, probably close to 100 of that. And the hydrant number, I don't have that bid in front of me yet. I haven't seen that, but they've told me it won't be more than the 100. And again, that money, it can either come from, well, ideally that should come from the water fund, right? So it wouldn't be coming out of general street funds. It'd be coming out of our water fund reserves.
The 100,000.
It can't be water. It can't be water FDCs because it's just moving the lines. It's not an upsize or anything. So it'd have to be just general water dollars.
Would that just be the 100,000, Chris? The 100,000 water.
No more than 100,000.
The 183 would be streets.
Yeah.
Where it's coming from. Yeah.
183 would be street or potentially urban renewal, but I think our urban renewal is there. I mean, we may have the 183 to move up to, but I know we have it in street. In fact, if you recall, the capital improvement plan for this year, we were putting that much money towards the 11th Street project. If that's not going to go through that year, that money technically is already in the budget to be spent on a street project. We just have to earmark it for streetscapes instead of North 11th Street. And that's money that wouldn't be there next year or in future years. So it'd be an amendment to the capital improvement plan.
Chris, the question that I have is, we've seen these tremendous cost increases. And this project is not to be completed until 2024. So who's to say there isn't going to be another $2 million in increases?
Yeah, this commitment gets us through plan specifications and estimates. It gets us through PS&E approval at ODOT. We're going through their process to go out for bid and to get estimates in. So you're absolutely right. This is a commitment they're wanting from us that we'd be willing to spend up to $300,000 to help cover this $2.1 million overage we've seen. They're asking for the city to commit to roughly $300,000 towards the project. They'll negotiate with us on the exact numbers once we get through PS&D, and then we've still got to go out for bid. And once the bids comes in, then those come back to the city council for approval. So if the bids come in and they're $2 million over budget, again, we'll be looking back to ODOT saying, you know, where are those overages coming from? And they may want to split again and say, well, you know, 1.7 million of that is inside the curb and 300,000 of it is outside of the curb. And so they may want to split again. But at that time, the city will have an opportunity, and we'll have a little bit more time at that point to look at those numbers and negotiate those a little bit better. So we're not committing to the project. We're just committing to get to that next phase in the project. You know, initially, well, after the first meeting with ODOT, I was very concerned because I was given the impression ODOT was going to have a hard time stepping up and spending any additional money on this project. And I even got a little bit of cold feet that ODOT was even that excited about doing this project, because it was really, they were just here because Philomath was interested in them being at the table. Though, you know, ODOT has really come to the table this week contrary to that. So they're willing to step up. They need to show everybody has a boss, right? So our regional partners at ODOT need to be able to show the higher ups that if we're going to pull this extra money into our region for this project, the city's willing to step up and help proportionately as well. And so I think that's really what they're trying to do, is make an argument for that extra money to come this way. They want to see that Philomath got some skin in the game as well, which I'd love to say ODOT should just cover the whole thing. I don't want to show our cards too much, but we may still get to that point if I can negotiate some additional money towards engineering, maybe about $300,000, for example, then it would be a wash. But I don't want to overcommit, because those are negotiations I've still got to have with ODOT, and I don't know what resources they've got available to them. So yeah, I think they're eager to do the project, but I know that they wouldn't have the $5 million we've yet to contribute to the project in order to move forward with it this year or next year. I think those are going to be very competitive funds to go after.
Councilor Biscoe.
So I have, well, a couple comments, but at first a question, which is, if we have spent $1 million more than we had planned on engineering, does that mean that our investment in this is more like $8.2 million, not 7.2? And where's that money coming from, or where does it have to be replaced down the road? Because $1 million is substantial. So that question first, but then a couple comments after. Yeah, so the money, the 7.2 million we've committed to the project includes the 2.1 million for engineering. It was just the original estimate going back a year ago was $1.1 million. So that's what's increased. That was after the leverage funds came on, which extended the project, made it larger. It added the bike track. It added the rapid flash beacons. You know, there's just all these other funds have come in to add additional elements to the project, which is great. But we've paid for that engineering to take place, and we've allowed that because, again, our contingency numbers continue to drop, and so we've had more of our urban renewal dollars have been freed up because we're not earmarking urban renewal dollars for contingency. We've been able to use that for the engineering that needed to get done for the project. So yeah, it's not in addition to the 7.2 that's included in the 7.2. Okay, so if we've utilized contingency expectations to pay for that $1 million, that reduces our contingency available for construction by $1 million, correct?
No, that the construction contingency is still built into the project.
Okay, so I'll go back to that $1 million, and it had to have come from somewhere. What did we give in order for us to come up with that extra $1 million?
We gave where we started, which was a 30% contingency towards construction, has decreased now down to 3.5% contingency. So some of the urban renewal funds that were going towards the contingency are no longer needed for contingency because it's not 30% anymore. It's come down. That money then is being spent on engineering instead.
Okay, that's helpful, but I'll say that contingencies for construction, we don't know what they might be yet. So while on paper we might have reduced it, there's that risk when we get those bids back, and ODOT's contracting has been running high because of costs of materials, that we're going to need more than 3.5% in contingency fees to offset that. So just a comment there, But my other question is the risk of this $300,000. So if we end up getting nothing out of this because we can't move this project forward, we've spent $300,000 that we could be spending somewhere else in infrastructure. So I'm hesitant to just say, sure, let's go ahead with this hypothetical approval for a project that we don't even know what the estimates are going to be, and they're going to be higher than we were expecting. That's a lot of dollars when we have to look at where does that get compensated from in our budget.
Yeah, so two things. We only spend the money if we approve the actual estimate that comes in. So we're essentially committing to add that extra money into the budget, but we're not committing to spend that money. That won't happen until we actually approve of the bid that comes in. And I can't tell you if that bid that comes in is going to be at budget or over budget or where. The second point I will make is one of the reasons why the estimate has gone up so high is because Murray Smith has been very proactive at looking at recent bids and recent submittals, and they've noted what those construction costs are coming in at. So they're looking at bids that were even open like 2 weeks ago on ODOT projects, and they're seeing what the cost of asphalt was per unit or per tonnage, and that's what they've updated their estimate to reflect. And so, you know, they're not basing this off of numbers from last year. That's why we're seeing this increase, is because they're looking at, you know, what are current bids going for. And yeah, we're not scheduled to go out to bid till the end of July, and we could still see some price fluctuation between now and the end of July. But that is this cost increase is it's a reflection of what they're seeing bids come in at right now to ODOT. So they're very proactive in looking at those bids when they're awarded and seeing those unit costs. And that's reflected in this update, that's making up 1.7. So it's not like we're going to see a 30% increase from now to when we get the bids in. It may be 30% over what it was a year and a half ago, but it's not going to be that big of an increase going forward. So, you know, we don't know. I can't commit any more than ODOT can commit what the bids are going to come in at. All that the engineers can do is look at what are the current rates, what are current bids coming in at, what are current contractors bidding at. Let's put our prices there, or even a little bit above that to be conservative. Let's make that the new estimate. Let's get ODOT and the city committed to those dollar amounts and continue to get ready for a project to go out for bid. And then you hope that you get a favorable bid coming in. And that's part of the game, unfortunately, is it really depends on who the contractors are and how hungry they are for work.
Councillor Lowe.
So just distilling this all down, I mean, if we authorize the 300,000, like you said, then you go and negotiate with ODOT. You get it through this gate, this statewide phase gate, whatever. Do what you do. Then it can get to the bid opening, but if the prices have gone up a lot, you come back to council and we just say, no, we're not going to do it. So we haven't spent the 300,000. If we've allocated it to get you through this stage, maybe up to the next, and then depending on where we are, then we can say yes or no. So we're not.
Right. Yeah, the only money we would be spending would be some additional engineering money to prep the doc, or for the preparation of the bid documents.
Oh.
If we say no today, then we won't spend that engineering money. We won't prepare the docs. We just won't move forward with the project, right? I mean, if we're adamant to not do it, we just won't do it. And either ODOT will scurry and try to find that extra money to kick in our stead, or they won't, and the whole project will just be tabled, and we'll end up, whether we spend it or somebody else spends it, eventually we're going to be re-spending taxpayer money for re-engineering and getting easements in place again and all those other things that have been prepped for construction season for this year. A lot of that work will get redone, which again, there's worse things. I don't want to be wasteful of taxpayers' dollars here. In all honesty, talking with my staff a little bit last week, it was like, let's just pull out. Let's just, kind of double down on ODOT and say, you fund the whole thing. or we just won't do it, right? We'll take our $5 million we haven't spent yet on construction. There's a lot of things we can do with, what are we, $3.4 million in urban renewal dollars? There's a lot of money we can do, or a lot of projects we can do with that money that isn't streetscapes. The street money, the SDC money, there's, again, other projects we can do with those funds. And we could leave it completely up to ODOT when they're good and ready to come in and repair the highway. But I don't think we would be in a very good position to then negotiate for some streetscape improvements in conjunction with our project. I don't know they'd be all too happy with continuing to work with us. So I think there is some benefit in continuing forward where they're hitting the majority of this. And honestly, it's the council's decision here. I'm just trying to lay it out there. But really, with the amount of, we all know, inflation's in double digits right now. We all know construction costs are through the roof. To have a project at $14 million, and we're looking to the city saying, hey, can you come up with an extra $300,000, $100,000, which is money that really isn't an increase in cost. It's an increased project that you were going to do, and now you're having us do instead. So really, you're talking $180,000 increase on a $14 million project. Doesn't seem like a real heavy lift for as bad at times as we are as far as going out for bid. So I kind of changed my tune, I guess. I'm putting it out there. I changed my tune from last week. I know I talked to Councilor Tazi after the Public Works Committee meeting and was pretty negative on the whole thing. And I've kind of changed my tune a little bit. I think, asking for $180,000 for the increased costs of things outside of the curb lines, and then asking the city to pay for the $100,000 to move our water hydrants and our water lines, it doesn't seem like too big of an ask, all things considered. And so I'd recommend the council give a consensus for me to move forward, negotiate with them, and then bring back an offer, something that hopefully the city can live with.
Chris, I'd just like to comment that I believe this is a very important project to the city. It's a very visible project. We've asked for community input on the theme of the project. We have an ad hoc committee that has been working hard to design our inlays and bike racks and things that will be visible to the public. We have business owners who are committed to build the kiosk that will go on 13th Street. And this project has been on the works for 15 years. From my perspective, I think it would be heartbreaking to not move forward. And based on your comments, I'm comfortable with committing to the $300,000, assuming that we do get reasonable bids, which is probably a big assumption at this point. One technical question I do have for you, you mentioned that the construction contingency has dropped to 3.5%, which seems completely inadequate. Is that is the amount of the contingency dependent on how those bids actually come in?
Yeah, so I just looked at the numbers. It's 442,000. So yeah, it is right at 3.5% as a contingency. I don't do this every day. That's the contingency that ODOT and Murray Smith, that's the contingency that ODOT requires for all their projects going out for bid, that 3.5%. So it's kind of an industry standard. It's where their comfort level is. Again, we started at 30%, and as you narrow down and you know exactly what materials you're going to buy, and you know exactly when you're going to go out for bid, and you start narrowing things down, your uncertainty decreases quite a bit. So you've still got $442,000 there in case you run into something, you hit some basalt that you're going to have to dynamite through or something. So there's still some money there. Yeah, I don't know much more than that, other than I can tell you that 3.5 number comes from ODOT. That's the number they're comfortable with going through the project. And if we go out for bid and the numbers way, way too high, then we have the discussion at that point, right? You start talking to the contractor, you see if there's things you can start pulling out of it. You see, you start the negotiation process with the contractor and see where you land. But we can't get there until we know we're going to get through PS&E at this point.
Okay. Councillor Lowe.
Well, I agree with Councillor Causey's assessment of this. So are you looking for just a consensus, or do you want a motion, or what are you looking for?
It'd be nice to get a motion, and I didn't prep something. Again, we just had this meeting this afternoon, and I was asked by ODOT to come back with some level of commitment from the city council. So if the council is comfortable doing a motion and a vote on that, I think the motion would be to proceed with the streetscape project with a commitment of up to $300,000 to get through the plans, specifications, and estimates portion of the project. I think that's all I need at this point.
Do I have a motion? Councillor Lehman.
You don't have a motion, but I do have a comment though.
Okay.
I've been thinking about this a lot over the past month or two, and Councillor Causey, I think, did a great job of highlighting that this has been an ongoing project since ODOT essentially forced the city of Philomath to adopt a couplet and build a couplet that no one who lived here wanted to begin with. They straightened out Highway 20 between here and Newport to facilitate the flow of heavy freight through our town. And now, I don't know if this is just my perception, but it almost feels like they're suggesting that they're doing us a favor by completing the project that they started 15 years ago that none of us actually wanted. And it rankles me. I'm not going to vote against moving forward with the extra $300,000 because I think it needs to be done. It just irritates me to no end. And I think that it should be pointed out when you're negotiating with ODOT that they're the ones who forced us to have the couplet. They're the ones who increased heavy freight on our main street. And we're the ones who have to drive on the crappy road, and they're responsible for it. And I know it's all taxpayer money in the end, but again, it just rankles me that they approach it like they're doing us a favor by completing a project that they forced onto us 15 years ago.
Well said, thank you. All right. Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the additional $300,000 in funding to move the project forward to the plans, specification, and estimates stage. Do I have a second? Councillor Lowe, thank you. Any further comments or discussion? Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to point out that in these increased costs, it's not just materials. I see that there's labor involved in here as well. Certainly a traffic control supervisor doesn't have anything to do with the cost of petroleum or asphalt. So when we look at these all of a sudden increased costs, I would be hesitant for us to just assume that they are incidental based on inflation or cost of materials or supply chain issues. And it's just a perspective more than it is, any action that we might want to take. I also am extremely, extremely wary of a 3.5% contingency coming out of a contracting background, working in contracting today. Not only if that's a standard, I would ask, like if that you stated that's an industry standard, then why aren't we sticking with that 3.5% contingency? It just seems like that's highly unlikely that we will only experience a 3.5% variable in this estimate of cost. And the bottom line is every dollar that we expend over and above what we have planned to expend will come at the cost of something else in Philomath. So it's just a comment to this process. I do agree with Councillor Lehman on the perspective of the ODOT project in general, and do feel that that opinion should be expressed as nuanced and politely as possible, but the burden should fall on the taxpayers. of Philomath in order to accommodate heavy highway traffic and commercial traffic running through downtown. So just those comments. I would love to see some reconciliation on that industry standard. I have seen none of our documents previous to this conversation have a 3.5% contingency only. And so it's just a big question mark for me as we move forward in this. I do agree that I think the $300,000 is a reasonable place to get us that next step. But I haven't seen any ODOT contracts come in and only 3.5% over their expected costs as of recent.
Well, then let me speak to that, I guess, real quick. So the 3.5 isn't a contingency against what your bid is going to come in at. The 3.5 contingency is for the duration of the project. So the goal is to get your bid estimate at where your bid's going to come in at. The 3.5 contingency is a project contingency so that during the duration of the project, if things come up, they can submit change orders or additional work orders to tap into that additional contingency money that then the contractor, then the author, or the in this case, ODOT or Murray Smith and the city would approve for them to do that additional work that needs to be done during the duration of the project. So it's not a hedge against a higher estimate. It's a hedge against additional work that needs to be done throughout the construction phase of the project. That's what that 3.5 contingency is for. I don't think anybody's guessing that, every estimate is going to come in at 3.5% of our asking bid or below. That's not the intent of the contingency at all. There's every intent that bid might come in higher at our estimate or below. But in either case, no matter where it falls, you're going to have a 3.5 contingency built in to that project for construction overages.
Perhaps then a clarification, because certainly we've already expended more than we anticipated on engineering, for example. So maybe we're just clarifying in this open space that we expect that there's going to be additional costs and just being aware of that.
Right. I think it's a fair anticipation. It's a matter of how much can we stomach and how much will ODOT bear and how much will ODOT look to the city to come up with.
In our public works meeting, I had asked if someone from ODOT could attend our June council meeting to speak to this. Is that something the councilors would like to see? One yes nod and a lot of I don't know.
In the end, it's going to matter what that request for proposal brings in for bids more than it's going to matter what the project looks like. We know the scope of the project generally. We know the general dollars. The bottom line is it going to come in at 50% the expected cost, over the expected cost? I mean, that's where the decision really lies.
Okay.
I don't know if that would be beneficial pre-request for proposal or not.
Point, I'll take it. Okay.
Yeah, well, if we go out for bid in July, it'd be the August meeting would be the appropriate time to have ODOT come and talk through. Here's the bidding process we followed. Here's the bids that we received. Here's the one that we recommend approval of, and I mean that would be a good time to have that discussion. Again, I think ODOT would be happy to come. I can get Savannah, or I can get Bill Ness, or any number of our partners at ODOT to come and talk previous, but for sure at the August meeting, we'll plan on having ODOT here to talk about the actual bids themselves.
Okay, that sounds like a good approach.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, please go ahead.
So ODOT will be handling these requests for proposal, in this case, not Murray Smith or not West Tech, like some of our other work.
Correct. Yeah, we thought we'd get a lot better responses if it was bid as an ODOT project through their network rather than doing it on our own.
Okay, if there are no further questions or discussion, take a vote on the motion. All in favor of advancing the $300 or approving the $300,000 to go toward the project if the bids are acceptable? Please raise your hand. All right, motion passes unanimously.
Great,
Okay.
thank you. And I will convey those sentiments as well as bluntly as I can to ODOT.
Take Councilor Lehman with you.
I was going to say, I might be talking about the Lehman to come with me.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other staff items to report? Councilor Lehman.
Yeah, I was just curious about if we could get some information on about how many people are viewing our videos on our YouTube channel.
City recorder, is that
Do you
possible?
have the information?
Not offhand,
No, I didn't mean
I can
like-
take a look and
Yeah.
come up with some.
Okay, you don't?
Okay.
No. I will be happy.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, if there are no
One
further,
other quick update, Chair. I just have one other quick update, sorry.
oh, okay.
I did get an email this afternoon from Benton County regarding the ARPA grants that we'd applied for. We'd applied for one for the funding the skate park, the total cost of the skate park construction. And we'd also asked for a grant to look at homelessness and establishing a homelessness policy in the city and doing some work there. They said they received 3 times the requested amount of money that they had, and they were not able to fulfill either of our requests. So both of those were rejected, unfortunately. So we'll move forward with the feasibility study grant application that Chelsea's working on and take the slow road to the streetscape project, or excuse me, to the skateboard project.
All right, thank you for the update. I'm sorry we can't end on a more positive note, but with that, I'll turn the meeting over to the